So yeah, today I'm going to be talking about alternative feeding and also a little bit about Oxford cattle and just how we run our alternative feeds here. So to start us out, I just want to talk a little bit about Oxford cattle. So what we have in the video here is just kind of a little tour through the farm, starting in our calf yard, in the hutches, and it'll go all the way up to our grower barns. So Oxford Cattle is a dairy beef operation in southern Ontario. We're just outside of Woodstock and around Burgessville area. We receive between 600 and 1,200 calves weekly, and the calves are about 7 days old when they arrive here. We buy in mixed sex and breed, although the majority of our calves are Angus Holstein crossbreds. We receive calves both on a calf route program where we have route drivers going direct to dairy farms and picking calves up, as well as from auctions in Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. The majority of our cattle are reared for 6 months and sold at 650 weights, but we finish about 10% on property. So just to talk a little bit about my role at Oxford Cattle. So I do our health management, where I'm the point of contact for both our health team and the veterinarians. I do barn checks, just checking on the overall health of the barns, monitor our records. I also do a lot of our data management where I analyze the impact of calf level factors such as breed, sex, source, arrival weight on the health and performance of the calves on our property. And then I also track health and performance records at both an individual calf level, group level, and barn level so we can have a good idea of how we're doing and how we can improve. I also do some of our nutrition work alongside our actual nutritionist, where I track our intakes, I test different feed ingredients, and I will rebalance rations if we need something changed on the fly. And then I also manage our research program, where I plan and execute our internal research trials, collaborate with industry on trials, and we are currently filling a new nursery barn to expand our research program, and we work a little bit with the University of Guelph on this as well. So to start out with our calves in the hutch period, we have our calves at both individual and paired hutches. They stay in these hutches from their arrival until week 11. In the hutch period, they receive milk from arrival until week 7. And most places are feeding typically either a whole milk or a milk replacer. What we do is we buy ingredients in bulk, and then we do our own milk recipe and mixing in-house. We feed grain ad libitum the entire time they're in those hutches. Again, most places are typically buying and feeding a calf starter, but we feed a TMR right from arrival. And then water, of course, is also ad libitum. To get into that milk ration, so from arrival until week 2 of life, we feed a 26 fat, 24 protein milk. Then from week 3 to week 7, we drop that fat down to a 22 fat and continue with the 24 protein. The idea here is the calves are starting to eat some more grain and can make up some of that energy that they're losing from that fat with the grain. For weeks 5 plus, we replace half the diet with crush milk, and I'll get into what crush milk is in a little bit. We mix this at 13.25% solids, and then this is what our weaning program looks like, where they receive 5.8 kilograms per day from arrival, and then they drop down to 0 kilograms a day by week 8. So this is our general recipe for our milk. So they're getting 66% what I'm going to call milk, then 21% fat, 13% whey, and 1% premix. So the milk could be anything from a skim milk, a reverse osmosis milk, buttermilk, and it can be both in powder format or liquid format. The fat source is typically lard, and then if we get something else, we'll mix it in with the lard. Currently, we have a lard, coconut, and sunflower oil blend. The whey can also be in a few different formats, so we can get a powdered whey, a liquid whey, whey permeate, whey protein concentrate. Currently, we're feeding a mixture of whey, a powdered whey permeate, as well as a whey protein concentrate. And then the premix just has our minerals and vitamins. So to get into that crushed milk, we'll see a video here of how we make it, but it is discard milk from grocery stores and milk plants. So we receive it in their packaging, and then we use this machine called a depackager to extract the milk from the packaging without a whole lot of labor. So we put the contents in those little totes there. The tote goes into the depack and it gets flipped over. The machine then crushes it and goes through filters, and you'll see the milk come out the bottom there in a second. That then gets pumped out to a milk truck and delivered to our milk house where they can mix the milk. So in terms of what types of milk we get, we see skim milk, condensed milk, chocolate milk, buttermilk. That one there was actually strawberry milk. And then the one thing that gets a little difficult with this is we don't always know what milk we're getting before we get it or when we get it. A lot of times it is unlabeled. So what we then do is we use a machine called an NIR, near infrared spectrometer, to determine the fat content of the milk we're dealing with so that we can rebalance our ration appropriately to make sure that even though the ingredients are constantly changing, that the calves are still getting a consistent ration in terms of the level of fat and protein that they are getting. We also only feed this crushed milk to the older calves to try to minimize the likelihood of upsetting the younger calves that are a bit more sensitive. In our calf TMR, we feed it in the entire hutch period as well as for the first week that they move into the barn. This would be what a typical ration would look like. So I'm sure the first thing a lot of people are going to notice is that our ration has a lot of ingredients. And the reason for this is we use quite a lot of byproducts or alternative feeds. So a typical ration for the hutches always includes 11% straw, and then the rest of the ingredients are the ones that can vary a little bit more. So in our current ration, we have soybean hulls, soybean meal, dry distilled grains, a in-house made bakery meal, ground corn, wheat shorts, corn steep liquor, and mineral premix. So again, this is arrival until week 12. And this current ration is about 65% byproduct. It's around 15% protein, 3% fiber, 43% non-fiber carbohydrates, and 21% starch. To get into that bakery meal, we make it in-house, usually every week, if not more often. And with that, the composition varies. So some common ingredients that we'll often see in our bakery meal are chocolate, candy, muffins, bread, cookies, spices, marshmallows. So this is a couple photos that I took inside our commodity shed. So we had potatoes, strawberries, stroop waffles, cheese, feta cheese, and we had different types of soda and energy drinks in there as well. And then this is all mixed with wheat shorts to kind of cut it a little bit. So in terms of our grower period, our calves move into the barns at week 11. So they're group penned, and depending on the barn, it is between 28 and 70 head per pen. They're in the barns from week 12 until week 29, at which point the majority of the calves are sold at about that 650 pound. So in terms of the nutrition, we keep them on that calf TMR for the first week as we're trying not to do a pen move at the same time as a nutrition change. Then from week 13 to 20, they're on our dry grower TMR. Then 21 to 29, we're looking at a wet grower TMR. So for that dry grower ration, this would be a typical ration that we're looking at. So again, we have that straw, wheat shorts, soybean meal, dry distilled grains, bakery meal, ground corn, corn steep liquor, and a premix. So this ration right now is about 45% byproduct, 17% protein, 7% fiber, 46% NFC, 25% starch. Once we get into our wet grower ration, we start to see a little bit more of the, I would say, the more different type ingredients. So we still have straw, wheat shorts, but then we're adding in Kraft, which is another in-house made mix. We're also seeing some sweet corn silage, cob meal, fruit, which was seen getting dumped into the mixer there, as well as frozen vegetarian lasagna is a common thing that we have on hand. So this ration is about 30% byproduct, 15% protein, 4% fiber, 51 NFC, and 38% starch. So what you might notice going through our rations is that we do feed our rations don't get very hot. So 38% starch, I don't think it gets much higher than that here. And the reason is when we're feeding all these alternative feeds, we tend to have to make a trade-off where our ration is going to be a little bit more variable compared to a normal ration. And so we find that we can't push the cattle quite as hard on the side of starch and energy if we're going to be changing the ration so frequently. So Kraft is another in-house made product, and it's made in this depackager here. We call this our solid depackager compared to the one that makes the crushed milk. So it's mixed in-house. Composition varies a lot. Some common things that we'll see in this mix, are mayonnaise, ketchup, mustard, relish, cream cheese, sour cream, ice cream, salad dressing, and butter. We call it Kraft because quite a lot of the ingredients are your Kraft type ingredients, your Kraft condiments, your salad dressing, those type of things. So what our mixers try and do is once we see the ingredients that we have to work with for the week, which can vary quite a bit, they'll separate the ingredients into low fat, medium fat, and high fat ingredients. So then what they're following, instead of a set recipe on use this ingredient, they know they want to use a certain percentage of low fat, high fat, and medium fat ingredients to try and come up with a mixture at the end that's similar in composition. We also then cut this 50% with wheat shorts to try and minimize the amount of variation, and then it doesn't go into the diet, like the overall ration, at a very high amount. We also worked with A&L Labs as well as our in-house NIR to develop a NIR method to measure the fat content of this as soon as we mix it. So we know if we're working with a higher fat or a lower fat Kraft than usual, and we can adjust our ration accordingly. Our last ration that we're working with is our finisher ration. So here would be a typical ration that we see for our finisher cattle. Again, we're dealing with quite a bit more ingredients than you'll often see. We still have straw, wheat shorts, Kraft, our DDGs, bakery meal, ground corn. In potato season, we see quite a lot of potatoes. We have our supplement, sweet corn silage, cob meal. In this one, we usually have pizza dough, soybean meal, as well as cornstarch flour. So our finisher ration tends to be about 40% byproduct. So what you'll notice is actually our calf ration ends up with the most byproduct because we don't have to pack it full with as much high energy products, versus by the finisher ration, we're trying to get some more of those corn type products into them. We end up with a 14% protein, 4% fiber, 54% NSC, and a 37% starch. So again, it's not a typical finisher ration with a very high amount of starch and very high amount of corn. And that's just a trade-off we make to be able to use these alternative feeds. And that is the end of my presentation.